Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto this week.
What are your views on the DEA's proposed rescheduling of marijuana, and what role do you see yourself playing in ensuring the process moves forward responsibly?
So, Senator, thank you. And if confirmed, it'll be one of my first priorities when I arrive to DEA to see where we are in the administrative process.
DEA nominee Terrence assures Congress that getting the cannabis rescheduling process clarified is a priority, but refuses to say if he's in favor of it or not.
I urge him to continue the rescheduling process that has just kind of stalled. There are many fronts we can fight this on, but we can't fight it alone. And that's why it's so great to have a partner like Ilhan and all of you in this fight together. So as I always say, huff, huff, pass the bill.
It was the last Prisoner Project Cannabis Unity Week in Washington, D.C., with 30 industry association advocates and lobbyists rallying on the Hill in support of moving forward on federal reform. And another huge slap in the face to democracy by the Texas State House. They're passing a bill to stop citizen-led initiatives for ballot questions that decriminalize cannabis crimes. A visit to Atlantic City, New Jersey for the 8th MJ Unpacked conference to hear the challenges and the barriers to entry for cannabis businesses. All that and more on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News, PCM TV's weekly production of the fight to end cannabis prohibition. I'm Alaina Pinto. Instead of reminding you to download the new PCM TV app, we're just going to put it on the screen and hope you know how to scan it. It will take you to Google Play and the App Store to download it. Okay, let's dive in. The new administration's first 100 days in the White House has certainly been eventful. The start of a tariff-driven trade war, the deportation of illegal immigrants, and oops, even some American citizens. Plus now, federal reform of cannabis is back in the news. President Trump's nominee for the head of the DEA, Terrence, had his nomination hearing this week. He's never been someone who has supported reform in the past and has made it very clear that he is not in favor of legalization. However, in his hearing this week, Cole used political non-speak experience to parry the direct question by Senator Alex Padilla about whether he is going to pick up the rescheduling movement that the Biden administration started after the Health and Human Services report concluded that rescheduling of cannabis should be considered.
What are your views on the DEA's proposed rescheduling of marijuana, and what role do you see yourself playing in ensuring the process moves forward responsibly?
So, Senator, thank you. And if confirmed, it'll be one of my first priorities when I arrive to DEA to see where we are in the administrative process. I'm not familiar exactly where we are, but I know the process has been delayed numerous times, and it's time to move forward.
Okay, well, the process that's undergoing is to move marijuana to Schedule 3 under the Controlled Substances Act. So we're maybe somewhere in the process. Are you committed to seeing it to fruition?
I need to understand more where they are and look at the science behind it and listen to the experts and really understand where they are in the process.
We know where we are. We know what the directive is. Get it to Schedule 3. Are you committed to seeing it to fruition?
So I don't know. I haven't seen that.
So you're leaving the door open to changing course as to...
I'm leaving the door open to studying everything that's been done so far so I can make a determination, sir.
So make myself a note here. No answer to that particular question.
So it's a priority, but he wouldn't answer the senator's direct question about whether he was supporting moving cannabis off Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act or not. While that was going on inside the Senate office building, outside the Capitol, the Last Prisoner Project organized the Cannabis Unity alliance of 30 other advocacy groups and lobbyists for a demonstration of unity outside the Capitol. The demonstration included the NCIA's chairman, Adam Rosenberg, and featured speakers and formerly incarcerated people who have been freed by the LPP and other clemency groups.
A second bill that we're all concerned about is called the States 2.0 Act, and this is introduced with Congressman Joyce, who's another co-sponsor of the caucus. But this just says let the federal government get out of the way. You know, the states are moving ahead. They're doing it through referenda. They're doing it through state legislatures. Why is the federal government dragging so far behind? We've got that bill out there. We also have a letter to the Appropriations Committee to prohibit the Department of Justice from using any funding to go after people in states where it's legal. And so we want to be sure that they can't undo things even if they're not doing things. You know, the progress towards this has stalled in the executive department despite what Trump said on the campaign trail. We don't see much of it moving, so it's going to be up to us to do it in Congress, and it's up to y'all to keep that drumbeat going and to help us move that forward. We need to act. We need to use our constitutional authority to pardon these individuals, commute sentences. The president could do it, but he's not. So let's us take it up and do it too. I urge him to continue the rescheduling process that has just kind of stalled. There are many fronts we can fight this on, but we can't fight it alone. And that's why it's so great to have a partner like Ilhan and all of you in this fight together. So as I always say, puff, puff, pass the bill.
Yeah. Give it up for our caucus culture!
This is the start of a series of lobby days in our nation's capital, and PCM TV founder Jimmy Young will be heading to Washington, D.C. for the National Cannabis Industry Association's Lobby Days, May 13th to 15th. This will be Jimmy's second trip to our nation's capital for the lobby days, and we will expect he will have some great interviews with political leaders, elected officials, advocates, and others. Also this week in Atlantic City was the 8th MJ Unpacked conference. It featured speakers, vendors, pitch contests, and Growers Cup competition. PCM TV's Jimmy Young was there with two other members of the Cannabis Coast to Coast News team, Pam Schmiel from New York and Marianne Cursetjee from Oregon.
What is it that differentiates your trade show, need to do trade show, from others in this space? There's quite a few things, but what's the one that sticks out in your mind? But I think the one defining thing that we do is curious, right? Like everything in our events curated. Our attendees are curated. We only allow licensed manufacturers in, credit investors. We want decision makers, senior level people. Our booth products are curated where they're custom booths that can be built for you, just sending graphics. We curate our content, make sure it's expert level. We're bringing in, unheard voices, really addressing the current needs of the market.
Jimmy is putting together a Cannabis Coast to Coast News special report on that conference that will be released this week on Thursday. Over the past few weeks, we've been getting reaction from Texas on the political maneuvering in the Lone Star State with the intent of reversing that state's ballot initiatives that have led to 7 cities voting in cannabis decriminalization laws over the last year. And now a Texas House committee has approved a Senate-passed bill that bans cities from future ballot questions on cannabis, basically stopping the democratic process of citizen-based initiatives for reform. That's not the only state, though, that is shaking up current laws. In Oklahoma, the Republican governor, Kevin Stitt, is cracking down on the hemp-derived products in his state. Kimmie Cannabis has more from the Sooner State.
I'm Kimmie Cannabis from Can I Talk About It with the Oklahoma Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Governor Stitt has issued a directive urging state agencies to intensify enforcement against psychoactive hemp-derived cannabinoids like Delta-8, Delta-10, HHC, THCO, THCP, and THCV. In an official letter to OMMA and multiple state enforcement agencies, the governor expressed concern over the growing availability of these chemically altered compounds, often sold in both licensed dispensaries and illicit markets, with a particular emphasis on risk to youth. He called for a coordinated cross-agency approach to crack down on unregulated production and sales, especially in places like gas stations and convenience stores, while also tightening oversight within the licensed cannabis system. Agencies have 30 days to present a joint enforcement strategy and suggest any legal changes needed to support it. Meanwhile, adult use cannabis advocates in Oklahoma are pressing forward. The ORCA 2026 petition was filed on March 31st. That kicked off a required 120-day waiting period, during which legal challenges can be filed before signature gathering begins, projected to start August 1st if no delays arise. Once approved, there will be a 90 days to gather enough signatures, followed by verification and review by the Secretary of State and Attorney General. Then a final 90-day window for any challenges. If all goes smoothly, Oklahomans could vote on adult use cannabis as early as June 2026. That's it for your Oklahoma Cannabis Report. For Cannabis Coast to Coast News, peace, love, and all that good stuff.
There has been a very interesting development in the cannabis world over the past few months. A few weeks ago, we told you about Curaleaf's closing of a licensed legal dispensary in Florida and opening a hemp store in its place. This should come as no surprise to anyone who is monitoring what is going on in this space, since the Farm Bill of 2018 basically legalized the cannabis sativa plant and defined hemp as limiting THC to just 0.3% when tested at dry weight. The problem is that human behavior and science have created a way to get high from these products, and since they are considered legal, they are for sale, untested and unregulated at gas stations, convenience stores, and smoke shops. So with the hemp market growing in the billions year over year, we are incorporating a weekly hemp report in our weekly news show. We are fortunate to welcome Kerry Hinkle to our news team. Kerry has been entrenched in Washington, D.C. as a member of the U.S. Hemp Roundtable and has now moved on to work with a major player in that space, the Bayou City Hemp Company. Here's Kerry with this week's Hemp Report.
Howdy, everyone. This is Kerry Hinkle from Bayou City Hemp out of Houston, Texas. And this is your Hemp Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. We have 2 states this week to report on as it relates to developments in hemp policy. First off, in Florida, we had SB 438 and HB 7027 this past session as 2 completely different ideas on how to regulate hemp products. The Senate bill from Senator Burton, 438, would have regulated and sold hemp beverages in a similar manner as alcohol. We had HB 7027 from Representative Salzman on the House side, which was a more encompassing approach to how to regulate these products without complete bans, but ultimately having a different approach on where they might be able to be sold, how many milligrams can be in each product. These are 2 very different approaches to what most folks agree is something that needs to happen and that regulations need to get put in place. As these legislators were dug in on these varying approaches, we had for months been anticipating a House and Senate leadership debate to get these differences worked out and ultimately find a compromise to implement some much needed regulations in the state. Well, politics politicked, and for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with the hemp issue, both bills died this week, and we will have status quo as it relates to hemp regulations in the state of Florida until next year. Next, we go to our backyard in Texas, where Senate Bill 3, the ban bill, has been sitting in House State Affairs for a few weeks now. Well, as of late Wednesday night, the chairman of House State Affairs, Chairman King, has passed out a new version of SB 3, which is very similar to his version, which was HB 28, and this would establish regulatory authority for the TABC to sell and distribute hemp beverages. The bill would also establish hemp retail licenses to allow for hemp stores to sell all products that are not hemp beverages. Flower would still be legal under certain limits, edibles, tinctures, etc. This is a dramatic change from Senator Perry and the Lieutenant Governor's approach, which has been, as the original version of SB 3 suggests, an outright ban on products containing THC. We now wait for the full House to vote on the new amended version of SB 3, which includes the 3-tier language previously mentioned. That bill, HB 28, and now as the new version SB 3, went from a 30-page bill to about a 130-page bill and was given little to no time for review. So we expect sign and die day to be June 2nd in the state of Texas, although we hope that movement on the hemp bill will happen in the coming weeks. If nothing happens, we'll have our eye on special session if Governor Abbott chooses to call one, and that something could happen at that moment. Still a lot of up in the air as it relates to how Texas will handle hemp regulations, but in Florida, we know status quo until next year. As always, this crazy world of hemp policy never stops, and I will see you again next week for another hemp report on Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Again, I'm Kerry Hinkle with Bayou City Hemp.
Can anyone figure out what goes on with Florida politics? This week, the legislature there passed a bill to actually help veterans gain access to medical cannabis. By unanimous vote, the Senate passed a bill to allow veterans to gain access to the plant medicine, and the state will pick up the fees for veterans to get their medical cards. It's great. Wouldn't that be nice, though, if the federal government would do the same thing? The VA has never done anything for our veterans who want to use cannabis instead of the opioids that are typically given out like candy to vets to treat their PTSD. But here's some more good news, okay? Coming out of the state of Montana, the legislature there is moving forward on allowing tribal nations to open up their own cannabis legalization market. And Tina Tasaka has more on this exciting development for the indigenous community.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. There is forward movement in cannabis for tribes in Montana. Montana has passed a bill allowing tribal nations to enter cannabis compacts, with the state giving them direct control over cultivation, sales, and taxation. These compacts remove local barriers and grant tribes the same business rights as other operators, opening the door for full participation in the legal cannabis industry. There are 12 federally recognized tribes in Montana. A total of 8 licenses will be granted for tribal nations in Montana. Mint Cannabis, a well-established multi-state operator, has officially expanded into the Las Vegas market with the launch of 2 new dispensaries, one near the Las Vegas Strip, the other close to the Fremont Street experience. This strategic move brings Mint's distinctive retail model and premium cannabis offerings to one of the country's busiest tourist destinations. The expansion follows Mint's strong track record of success in Arizona, where the company has become a recognized leader in the cannabis space. Known for operating some of the largest and most innovative dispensaries in the state, Mint has built a reputation for delivering exceptional customer experiences and award-winning in-house brands. Its flagship Arizona locations feature amenities like cannabis kitchens with infused cuisine and desserts, express drive-thrus, and self-service kiosks, pushing the boundaries of the retail dispensary model. Mint plans to hire over 100 local employees in Las Vegas and aims to replicate its Arizona success in Nevada. Mint will offer a vast product line offering flower, concentrates, edibles, and topicals. Mint currently has 14 dispensaries in operation, with an additional 14 under construction or pending. They operate in 6 other states besides Nevada and Arizona that include Oregon, Massachusetts, Florida, Illinois, Missouri, and Michigan. Congratulations to Mint. That's it for the Nevada highlights and Tribal Nations. I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the A block, or first section of our weekly Cannabis Coast to Coast News report, but we have plenty more, including another dozen reports from states coast to coast. Plus, later in the show, we've got a story about a Massachusetts dispensary that hosted a bong pong exhibition. So don't go away. Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this.
We see a lot of companies out there that they don't do budgeting, they don't do forecasting, they don't do any strategic business development or strategic business thinking about what direction they want their company to go. They believe that being in cannabis is just going to automatically be a moneymaker, and they don't plan for things like 3 or 4 years after a state comes online. There's usually a decrease in the profitability of each company because the state gets saturated or gets to the saturation point. If you're not planning for that, you're going to be in trouble when that happens. And that's why we see a lot of cannabis companies go out of business or merge or get sold at that point in time.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is the B block or second section of our news this week. I'm Alaina Pinto. Despite the stalling of federal reform, states continue to grow their markets. Well, at least the states that have launched their adult use legal programs. New Hampshire's reform effort took another hit this week, and it looks like adult use might never get passed in the live free or die state. Now, senators in New Hampshire narrowly voted to table a House-passed adult use legalization bill for the next session. The vote was 12-10, and it will basically stall and pass on any more legalization discussion during this session of Congress in that state. Perhaps that's a good thing because their new governor, Kelly Ayotte, is already on record saying she will never sign an adult use legalization bill if passed by her legislature at any point during her tenure as governor. No such issue in Michigan, where that state has a robust cannabis market contributing to the over $123 billion legal cannabis market in the United States. Here's Michigan's Amie Carter with a report on the impact of President Trump's tariff trade war on the Michigan market.
I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters for this week's Michigan Report from Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Another week brings a fresh wave of headlines from Michigan's cannabis industry. Whether you're a professional in the field or simply an interested consumer, we've got the essential news you need. Let's dive in. Tariff troubles. The on-again, off-again tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump are unsettling Michigan's economy, particularly impacting the cannabis sector, which relies significantly on imported components for vape pens, as well as packaging and other supplies, now facing tariffs as high as 145%. Rough road ahead. Brian Hanna, the state's chief cannabis regulator, recently informed state lawmakers that he anticipates many dispensaries will either close or merge their operations in the coming 5 years, primarily because the state's supply of cannabis is exceeding consumer demand. Lock It Down, Michigan's largest cannabis lobbying group, is reportedly urging lawmakers to issue a freeze on retail licenses, at least until the industry can stabilize in light of falling prices, narrow profit margins, and intense competition from the black market. This call for a license freeze contradicts the language of the 2018 law that cannabis pioneers helped craft. That legislation decentralized licensing power, allowing local municipalities to dictate how many cannabis businesses can operate within their boundaries, essentially making the number of available licenses limitless. As the situation develops, it remains to be seen how lawmakers will respond to these pressing concerns. I will be sure to keep you updated. A skunky smell reported by local residents near what was thought to be an abandoned building recently led Barron County authorities to uncover over 550 cannabis plants and 34 pounds of cannabis that were allegedly grown and harvested without a state license. That'll do it for this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters.
There's a disturbing trend in our country lately where cannabis dispensaries, grow farms, hemp stores are all targets for violent crimes. Over the past few weeks, Marianne Cursetjee has reported on her industry coming under attack from criminals in Oregon. And now that violent trend has spread to Illinois. Here's the Chicago clone guy, Mark Allen, with more.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy, reporting from just outside of Chicago, Illinois for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is Bird. Thanks for tuning in. Unfortunately, we got an arsonist in Chicago breaking into dispensaries, a MSO dispensary and a hemp dispensary in Chicago, and literally throwing Molotov cocktails into that thing. I guess people like burning dispensaries and cyber trucks recently with Molotov cocktails. Interesting times. Stop it. Downtown Chicago, so that's pretty weird going on. We need to stop that stuff going on. So any information on that, let us know. Let's bust this guy. In good news, Illinois has had and is continuing to push a service program that helps clear and seal convictions, cannabis convictions for people for free. They've already helped over 5,000 people clear their criminal record, and they announced that there's 80,000 more people to help in Illinois that they can expunge their criminal records. 80,000 people with cannabis criminal records that now there's a free program to clear their records, which I think is great, but who's paying for that? Like, just expunge it. But that's my 2 cents that nobody asked for, once again. But that pretty much sums up this week's news for Chicago and the Illinois surrounding area. I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago Clone Guy, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Hi, I'm Matthew Friedlander with Skagit Organics, coming to you with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast. So the Washington State legislative session has officially ended, and we had a fairly eventful session this year. There were 4 pieces of cannabis legislation that passed. The 2 most notable ones were legislation dealing with collective bargaining for cannabis agricultural workers and limiting management agreements for licensed retailers. In Washington, you were only allowed to own 5 retail licenses, but many stores have been getting around this to expand beyond those 5 with management agreements that essentially give them full control over a licensed store without actually owning the license. I've talked about this before in previous reports, and some legislation was passed this year to try to rein that in and to deal with that. So we'll see how that shakes out. We expect that there will be some lawsuits springing up from this. On the event side of things, the Cannabis Alliance, full disclosure, I sit on the board of the Cannabis Alliance. We are Washington's largest and most effective cannabis trade group. We are hosting our 10th annual Washington Cannabis Summit on May 9th in Seattle. There are virtual options to attend this if anyone is interested. You can find information at thecannabisalliance.us. Also, the Leaf Bowl is coming up May 31st, I believe, down in the Tacoma area on tribal lands. So this is an awards show and event celebrating Washington's cannabis brands, and we are excited to participate in that once again. And we are looking forward to having some fun with our friends at the end of May. So that's what I've got for you this week out of Washington State. I am Matthew, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Since Marianne Cursetjee was in New Jersey this week, she and PCM TV founder Jimmy Young got together at MJ Unpacked in Atlantic City for her Oregon report.
Thanks, Alaina. Welcome back to the special edition of the Cannabis Coast to Coast News special report on location in Atlantic City, New Jersey, the site of MJ Unpacked, one of the premier B2B conferences in the cannabis industry. I am PCM TV founder Jimmy Young and the executive producer of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, and you never know when you go out in the field at a conference who you're going to run into, unless, of course, you know that Marianne Cursetjee from Oregon is here, because that's what happened. And of course, she won't be doing her Oregon report from Oregon. She's here in New Jersey, and we're going to let her get away with it because she's a prize-winning cultivar now in Oregon. Marianne, congratulations for what you've done with Alibi, first of all. But my first question, we get to talk about Alibi in a second, it has to do with the crime wave that is attacking the cannabis industry in Oregon, robberies, assaults. Is law enforcement taking any interest at all in helping the industry out now that they've been targeted?
No, sadly, law enforcement seems to be turning a blind eye. But you're totally right, Jimmy. There's been this massive crime wave. In the space of about 2 weeks, we had over 20 licensed facilities broken into in the middle of the night. The perpetrators would steal vehicles and use them to drive into the walls, break in, do destruction, lots of theft and property damage, and then take off in their stolen vehicles and never be found by the police.
Are they after cash or product, as far as you know, or both?
Yes, both, but primarily product. It's weird. There's licensees who have a variety of products sitting around and they pick and choose what they take. I think the rumors I've heard are that they're out-of-state gangs coming in. So it's really hard to tell where it's coming, but it's so bad that licensees have teamed together to hire private investigators so they can track these down, because we as licensees need to stick together and help each other out since the government isn't there to help us.
If I remember correctly from your reports in the past, the Portland cannabis market, another PCM, actually had to close. Is that right?
They did, yeah. Several businesses have had to close. The Oregon market is tough anyway, and then this is just one more thing that you have to deal with. And if you're on the edge, there's just no coming back from this.
That's just crazy, unfair, it's unjust, and especially when law enforcement doesn't seem to be doing anything about it. And yet, if you guys 5, 10, 15 years ago had cannabis, they'd be busting you very quickly, right? So this just is, again, the growing pains of a legitimate industry, and also the confusion between federal law and state laws, right?
Yeah, it's hard because if we had a normal business, we could teach our staff and, not advocating for gun violence, but there are places for using guns and weapons for self-defense, but we're not allowed to do that in cannabis. So our options of protecting ourselves are very limited. And so far, police haven't shown up to help.
That's just crazy. But another good reason why Alibi, now a 2-time winner of a cultivar in Oregon. First of all, congratulations on that. And more importantly, she's expanding here to the East Coast in New York City, and the New Jersey market is kind of part of that, but even though officially it's not. And it doesn't need to be, because New York's going to be a huge market anyway. First of all, congratulations on winning these awards. How important is it as a grower to have a resume, a plaque on the wall that says we were the best at this?
Well, it's interesting because there are lots of competitions in the industry, and many of them have historically been pay to play. So I don't really believe in a lot of competitions. They're kind of ego trips, and people with lots of money buy awards. But this one we chose to participate in, and it was blind judging. So experienced buyers and consumers from around the state of Oregon got samples. They were not given any information about what it was, no information about how it was grown or cultivated, anything. And they picked Alibi's product as the best one. So that's a huge honor because, as you know, Oregon is such a tough market, but we do grow some of the best flower in the country.
There you go. And that's Marianne Cursetjee. The brand is Alibi. You're watching Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Next up is Arizona, where the Hemp Industry Trade Association is fighting back against that state's attorney general. Here's Karen Black with that story.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Arizona's hemp industry is fighting back in court. The Hemp Industry Trade Association of Arizona filed a special action lawsuit against the state's attorney general after enforcement began on what she deemed are unlicensed retailers selling hemp-derived THC products. HEDA claims AG Mays misinterpreted the law and argued the products are federally illegal. The organization sought to block the state from enforcing the ban while the case plays out. Although the judge denied HEDA's request for an immediate pause, a crucial hearing is set for May 9th, where the future of Arizona's hemp market hangs in the balance. There's more controversy in the Grand Canyon state. The acting health director resigned this past week, citing an unfavorable political climate and no apparent path to confirmation as reasons for stepping down. Arizona's Department of Health Services manages the state's cannabis licensing program. On the legislative front, the advertising restriction bill passed the state Senate after major amendments. The bill now focuses only on actual cannabis and cannabis products, dropping earlier restrictions on THC-related items and allowing businesses that sell paraphernalia, not just licensed dispensaries, to advertise. The changes aim to protect youth while giving small businesses more clarity and flexibility. The bill heads back to the House, where lawmakers will decide whether to accept the amendments or send the bill to a conference committee for further negotiation. There's been no movement on the bill that would allow 18 rural opportunity licenses and dual medical adult use licensees in rural areas, and the measure to release clinical cannabis research funds is awaiting a House third read. Lawmakers are working to finalize these measures as the session nears its end. Meanwhile, a bill that aimed to shift cannabis tax revenue from community programs to law enforcement for cracking down on the illicit market died quietly without a Rules Committee hearing. Despite strong industry backing, the bill stalled this session, but similar proposals are expected to return next year. And lastly, Arizona's father of cannabis law, Ryan Hurley, was interviewed on Phoenix's local NPR station as part of a series about Gen Xers. Mr. Hurley, who grew up in the Dare and Just Say No generation, was instrumental in the effort to legalize medical cannabis in Arizona and helped draft the health department regulations for the medical cannabis program. That's all for this week's Arizona Report. I'm Karen Black from Green Baker Consulting, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the B block, but we have more state reports coming up in the C block. Plus, we return to Atlantic City and MJ Unpacked to hear from one of the most powerfully successful entrepreneurs, Precious Osagie Erese from the Precious Canna Company.
I want to hold this industry accountable to make sure that if we're going to continue to be in this industry, you are supporting those who are still locked up for this, okay? Because it's not cute.
What if we're right? What if all of a sudden they discovered that there is medical use for marijuana and that it is good for you and it's better than alcohol and it's better than opioids and it helps your health? What if we're right? What if they find that out?
Specific cannabinoids have medical value. These are facts.
I'm here today in hopes to assist in removing the demonized stigma of cannabis and the perception that cannabis is just about getting high. The true base of this plant has to be known.
I don't think anybody should ever go to jail for cannabis. Get some medicine, and everybody should have access to it.
This is something which, at the very, very least, is the key to alleviating suffering and extending life for millions of human beings. Right? For returning some kind of balance to our society, and quite possibly of restoring our planet's natural balance as well.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto, and this is the C block, or final section of this week's show. Over the first 100 days in office, President Trump has been quite busy, to say the least. One of his most controversial moves has been to try to stop the diversity movement in colleges and universities like Harvard and other private educational institutions. You don't have to look too hard to find the power of diversity in the cannabis reform movement. One of the most successful and powerful entrepreneurs in New Jersey is Precious Osagie Erese of the Precious Canna Company. Here's one of the first social equity licensees to excel in the Garden State. Her pre-rolls are now in 18 dispensaries around that state. And in Atlantic City this week, she took part in a few panels at MJ Unpacked, where she also took the opportunity to talk about the importance of support for minority entrepreneurs who were most impacted by the failed war on drugs.
We need to continue to support minority-owned women, Black women, people of color in cannabis. I know we're all thrilled and happy, but there's still a lot of work to do to make this equitable. We're in a different kind of landscape right now. Our country isn't necessarily reflecting what equity means. And trust me, I've gotten beat down since January 20th. So I want to hold this industry accountable to make sure that if we're going to continue to be in this industry, you are supporting those who are still locked up for this, okay? Because it's not cute. So if you're build with integrity. Thank you for all the support, and I appreciate you guys.
While the New Jersey market continues to grow steadily, New York continues to build their market. New York now boasts over 500 cannabis brands for sale, with over 260 operational dispensaries, a figure that is expected to grow to over 1,000 over the next few years. One more note from the Big Apple. Usually this time of year, New York holds its annual Cannabis Parade celebration, but this year, however, the event has been postponed. Supposedly, it will be resurrected in July while moving from Union Square to Harlem. Combined with the resignation of the Office of Cannabis Management Executive Director Dashida Dawson, there is a leadership void in cannabis world of New York right now. One of the first states to legalize adult use is Colorado, and that's where Xavier Jaillet now practices law after passing the bar recently. So congrats on that, Xavier. We are so proud of you. Let's check out his Colorado report.
I'm Xavier Jaillet, chair of the Colorado chapter of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce and an attorney at the McDonald Hopkins law firm. And here's what's happening in Colorado cannabis this week. On Tuesday, the National Cannabis Industry Association, or the NCIA, hosted their second annual stakeholder summit here in Denver. The summit was an opportunity for the industry, both members of the NCAA and the industry at large, to network and listen to two panels. One panel was focused on the NCAA and various affiliated organizations' efforts at the federal level to advance policy beneficial to marijuana. And the second panel was one focused more on Colorado, the NCAA efforts here in our state, along with affiliated organizations like Colorado Leads, efforts and legislative successes in 2024, along with a look to what those organizations will be doing in 2025. After the summit, there was an opportunity for networking and business development, followed by a happy hour hosted by Paragon Payroll. That's it for the Colorado Cannabis News this week. I'm Xavier Jaillet, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
In Connecticut this week, a smoke shop doing business as Planet ZAZA has finally been shut down by the state after a number of fines and court orders to cease and desist. The owner of the East Haven store, Mohammed Al-Rayshani, is now facing a $4.9 million fine for ignoring court orders. William Chong, the state's attorney general, announced this week that this fine was the largest civil penalty in the state's history. In a statement, Chong said, quote, "The state of Connecticut is not playing around. Legal cannabis is not a free-for-all. If you are unlicensed, if you sell untested, unregulated cannabis, we will find you and we will hold you accountable." End quote. This brazen disregard for the law started over a year ago in January of 2024, when many unannounced inspections discovered products that were way over the limit allowed for hemp products, including those that were more potent than any authorized for legal sale in that state. The state also cited Planet ZAZA for fake certificates that the store was licensed and that many of the illegal products were for medical use. Many products were produced at illegal facilities, nor were they tested by state-approved labs, and many showcased colorful packaging designed to appeal to underage young people. The state justified and accounted for the fine based on existing fine structure to pay $5,000 a day for the 621 days they willfully violated state laws, plus another $25,000 a day for the 73 days they ignored the court's temporary injunction. I'll save you the calculator time. It adds up to that $4.93 million fine. Amazingly, according to Google, that store is still open. Meanwhile, in Virginia, the race to become the next governor of that Commonwealth is heating up with two female candidates. A historic result is guaranteed, as one will become the first female governor in that state. As Joe Parsons tells us, both are being very cautious about their feelings about legalizing adult use, since their predecessor vetoed not one, but two bills sent to him by his legislature during the outgoing Governor Glenn Youngkin's term. Here's Joe with the Virginia Report.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection by Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WB, and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Both candidates in the 2025 Virginia governor's race have been silent and have declined interviews with any news outlets to discuss their opinions on what their stance on cannabis legalization will be moving forward. While it makes sense for Winsome Earl Sears to not discuss her positions, as she's the current lieutenant governor, and any oppositions to the current positions, such as not agreeing with any of Youngkin's vetoes, could create a rift in GOP structure that's currently here in the Commonwealth. However, Democratic candidate Abigail Spanberger has been a strong advocate for legalization and reform, with her campaign even acknowledging her support for an adult retail market. So, it's unclear why she would miss the media opportunities to support her views. But rest assured, this reporter will always have a spot reserved for either candidate if they wish to discuss how or when they're going to support reform in Virginia. This election is vital for the cannabis industry's future in the Commonwealth. Sears, in 2021, was quoted saying that there's no hope in legalization, and even fired a staff member for simple use of cannabis. Spanberger, on the other hand, has gone on record saying we need a formalized legal emerging cannabis market. The results of this election could either uphold the will of the people that spoke to legalize in 2021 or hold up the legal adult use market until 2030. In sales news, the monthly average for medical patients making a purchase for the fiscal year of 2024 was 46,166 patients per month. Due to HIPAA guidelines, the exact dollar amounts are not available, but those numbers are an increase of over 30% compared to 2023. Virginia currently still has one of the highest per ounce prices for medical grade cannabis, coming in at an average of $14 per gram. These high prices and the lack of a competitive adult use market have driven many to rely on the legacy market to get the medicine they need. Others will make the drive to either DC or even Maryland, as both have competitive pricing and concentrates. Maryland especially because of the allure of a robust adult use market that doesn't require a medical card to participate. These things are still a dream for most of us in Virginia, but don't worry, I'm going to keep fighting the good fight to make that dream a reality one day. Well, that's going to do it for this week's Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV in Charlottesville. And as always, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
In Massachusetts this week, the Cannabis Control Commission continues to study and delay releasing any regulations regarding the opening of a social consumption lounge. The CCC has had 6 years since voters passed the adult use ballot question, but still no decisions. This week, the embattled commission faced lawmakers at the State House, where they asked for more financial support in order to improve the efficiency of an organization that has stumbled more than once since its inception. In the meantime, Bay State sales continue to be strong, and in Haverhill this week, Talking Joints memo, Chris Ferrone checked out the second annual STEM Dispensary's Bong Pong. It's a jump-off event at the Renaissance Golf Club that was organized by Alaina Pinto, proprietor for STEM in Haverhill. The beneficiary for this event is the nonprofit group Patriots Helping Vets, and you can tell from these photos, courtesy of Chris Ferrone, all who participated enjoyed the quote, signature chaos for a good cause. The cause had a slightly different feel in Atlantic City for the 8th MJ Unpacked conference at the Hard Rock Cafe. Hosting a cannabis business event at the Hard Rock was the perfect setting, as that casino hotel played host to hundreds of vendors, dozens of speakers, and panel discussions focusing on everything from attracting capital to science and research to marketing and compliance challenges. PCM TV founder Jimmy Young was on hand and talked with MJ Unpacked founder George Jage while he was there.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this special edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News on location in Atlantic City, New Jersey for MJ Unpacked. And the man, the myth, the legend, the guy who started this whole thing is George Jage. George, first of all, thank you for being so gracious of allowing me to come in and just be me at your show. Is that okay?
Jimmy, I think you should always be you. Everybody else is taken. So, listen, I told you before, I mean, you're such a genuine personality and compassionate person. And, you know, I love having you come here and be able to be historian. So,
what? And I'd like to tell stories, as you know, of this industry. See, what is it that differentiates your trade show, need to do trade show. From others in this space, there's quite a few things, but here, what's the one that sticks out in your mind?
But I think the one defining thing that we do is curious, right? Like everything in our events curated. Our attendees are curated. We only allow licensed manufacturers in, credit investors. We want decision makers, senior level people. Our booth products are curated where they're custom booths that can be built for you, just sending graphics. We curate our content, make sure it's expert level. We're bringing in, unheard voices, really addressing the current needs of the market. And then, as you know, the party we had last night, if you're in the cannabis industry and didn't hear about it at this point, then you're not in the cannabis industry, because that thing was legendary. And tip of the hat to my very good friend James Ahadney at Fairchild for producing the event for us and all the sponsors of the event. That was sick. And it was so cool about that, Jimmy, is having a distilled beer. Like, I think everybody kind of brought their inner child out, and it just made people feel like they could play and be happy and spread joy. And the beautiful weather in Atlantic City. I hope everybody listening to this that didn't make it this year has a chance to come next year.
Absolutely, 100%. And if there's some place that I could go to find my inner child, it's not difficult, because I live it. You know that. You know that Peter Pan says, I never want to grow up.
I'm the same way.
I know. That's why we're friends.
That's right.
He's George Stage. I'm Jimmy Young.
And finally tonight, a happy birthday to country music legend and cannabis advocate Willie Nelson, who turned 92 last week. In comparison to other cannabis legends, Cheech Marin and Tommy Chong released their last movie this past week. The biopic documentary generated $560 million at the box office in the first week of release. That last movie was released in New York at the AMC Lincoln Square Theater on April 25th first, and both actor-comedians were there. And Tommy Chong asked the audience, does everyone got their minds ready for the movie? You know what I mean. And yes, we do, Tommy. And most importantly, that movie continues to be shown at a theater near you. So just get your mind ready, because after all, it's a whole new world of weed out there. So consume it responsibly. And that will do it for this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto, and we'll see you next week.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Big Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
Debbie Fazy with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Alaina Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast, PCM TV's weekly roundup of industry news from California to New York. I'm Alaina Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCM TV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.